What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be starting to go over kind of the less meta builds. So these are builds that might be able to pull very good DPS, comparable to the meta builds, but for one reason or another they're usually not used quite as often as the meta builds, whether that's because they don't pull as good DPS, it's a harder rotation, or some other sort of weakness that they have. Usually it's because they just pull lower DPS, but this particular build that we're going over is actually a modified heavy attack build, or I should say it's a light attack stam DK build. So this build can actually pull toe-to-toe with a heavy attack stam DK, and in the right hands it might even be able to surpass it. I personally haven't seen any light attack DK surpass a heavy attack build yet, but I'm sure not many people play stam DK anymore. So I haven't seen that many stam DK parses as a Wolfhunter, but from what I've heard, light attack DKs aren't necessarily in a bad spot right now, but there's definitely a lot of challenges that come with using a light attack build on a stam DK. So this particular video is all about this particular build. So this is something that I managed to create. It's a light attack build. You still have to do heavy attacks. Much like the Stamplars, it's very difficult to sustain a full light attack rotation, just because we don't have the same level of sustain as Stamina Nightblades or Stamina Sorks. So for this build, we'll be going over gear, skills, everything you need to know to recreate this build. This build, much like the rest of our builds, is kind of optimized around 12-man content, or organized groups, or organized 4-man content. So this assumes a couple things, like you have Alkosh, you have Infused Crusher, you have good uptime with both of them. So that's just kind of a forewarning here, just because this build might not necessarily be good for solo content. That you might need a different build if you're just doing solo content like VMA or something. Let's go ahead and get started here with our gear. So first off is Monster Helms. So you have kind of two options here when it comes to, or three options really when it comes to Monster Helms. Selene's right now for this particular configuration is going to be the strongest. Just because we're using Relequen, and Relequen proc still counts as direct melee damage, so we're able to proc Selene's while we're on our back bar as well. So that just gives us Selene's a little bit that edge that it needs to beat out Velidreth's. Now Velidreth is still a good option, so let's pull out Velidreth quick here, unless I already pulled it out. So Velidreth is the tried and true. I must have already pulled that. Yeah, I did. So Velidreth is pretty much a tried and true monster helm for stam DPS. It's still very, very good, and it does have the advantage of over Selene's in that because it's a spore that travels, it can actually hit ranged ads. Plus, there's 3 spores, so you have a little bit of cleave, and on bosses with larger hitboxes, you can sometimes get 2 or even 3 of those spores to hit, which increases the DPS of Velidreth. So that's something you want to keep in mind there. One other option too, and this does have its weaknesses, but it's a little bit easier to obtain than Velidreth's, is Stormfist. You're really only going to be using Stormfist if you're having a lot of trouble sustaining, just because that one piece effect gives you additional stam regen. And the 2-piece isn't terrible as a damage proc set, but the big weakness is of Stormfist is that the proc itself doesn't move. So if you're fighting against an enemy that moves around a lot, so a good example of this would be Felms or Lothus in Asylum, or even like the Twins, for example, in Vimo. Stormfist does lose a lot of power just because you do need to have that final 10k physical damage hit to actually hit in order to get the most damage out of Stormfist. So Stormfist is very good for bosses that don't move around a lot, but once you have bosses that start to move out of that proc, Stormfist loses a lot of its DPS potential. So those are your kind of 3 options for Monster Helms. So we do have one heavy piece here. The body pieces that we're using are all medium armor sets, so you can't get heavy armor pieces, so it's pretty much going to be possible to get heavy armor chest. So we have a heavy shoulder instead. With the health enchant, we are using Artaeum Takeaway Broth or Dubious Caporn Throne. So we do need a health enchant, and we do need a heavy piece in order to get up to a good level of health. Now for a 5-piece, just like the other builds, stamina builds, Relequen is going to be our set of choice. At the perfect version here, you can go with the imperfect version if you would prefer. So the difference between them is that 5-piece stamina bonus. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. The imperfect version is still very strong. The actual proc damage itself, the 200 physical damage stack, that doesn't change between perfect and imperfect. So Relequen definitely a very, very powerful set. Now, Relequen does have one weakness, and that is if you're not able to continually apply those stacks. So let's say you're switching targets a lot. Good example of this is the twins in Vima. If you happen to swap to the other boss, then you have to basically completely start your stacks over again. So in those instances, Relequen does have a little bit of a weakness there. In that scenario, I would recommend picking up Vicious Ophidian instead. Vicious Ophidian allows you to keep that minor slayer bonus, plus you keep the weapon crit bonuses. It does add weapon damage instead of max stam, and then the 5-piece just adds, reduces your cost of your stamina abilities by 8%, which helps out your sustain. Still, it would be my other primary set that I would turn to if I didn't have Relequen. Vicious Ophidian is also just base game, so if you don't have Cloud Rest, you don't have access to Cloud Rest because you don't have Somerset, then you can go with Vicious Ophidian instead. Other options also include Briarheart from Orsinium, and Hunting's Rage if you have nothing. Really have nothing else here to run, and also Twice Fang Snake. Twice Fang Snake, you will need to run the Warrior Mundus instead of the Lover Mundus. A little bit more on that. We are running the Lover Mundus here. So if you run the Lover Mundus with Twice Fang Snake and you have Alkosh, and if you use Crusher, you're going to be over penetrating, guaranteed. So I would only use Twice Fang Snake if your tank is not running Alkosh or something, or if you want to continue to run the Lover. If you don't want to, if you are running Twice Fang Snake and you do have Alkosh, then swap from the Lover to the Warrior. Now for our front bar set, we're going with a Ravager. You can use Advancing Yokeda. Stam PKs don't get quite as much out of the additional crit chance from Advancing Yokeda, just because they don't get any sort of additional crit damage bonus. Ravager is going to be a little bit stronger than Advancing Yokeda in this instance here. There are other sets that you can go for. You can go for Briarheart, you can go for Hundings is not a bad choice if you have nothing else to go for, but Ravager, Advancing Yokeda, Briarheart, those are going to be the strongest sets. So Briarheart and Ravager can be purchased. Ravager does only come in heavy armor, so you will need to have the jewelry and the 2 weapons. And yes, you will have to have weapons, because if you have one weapon be Relequen and one weapon be Ravager, then you lose. You're not able to maintain your stacks on the back bar, the Relequen stacks. So that's not what you want. So you always want to go Ravager, front bar, weapons. And again, because it's a heavy armor set, you will need to transmute your jewelry. They will come in healthy, so you will have to transmute them accordingly. Briarheart is a medium armor set, and you can purchase it off of Guild Traders, so your jewelry will already come in robust, so you should trade change them if you want to push out more DPS, but you don't have to, just because the robust is still going to be a DPS gain compared to healthy. And just like with Ravager, you still want to have the weapons there, but it is medium armor, so that's something that you can do there. But you still want to have the weapons of Briarheart if you're running Relequen or Twice Fang Snake on the body, because you do want to maintain those 5-piece bonuses for both of those sets while you're on your back bar as well. And then Advancing Yokeda is dropping Hellra. It is heavy armor, so just like with Ravager, you will have to transmute your jewelry. And again, weapons are ideal, weapon and jewelry. So speaking of weapons, for our front bar here, we have Axe and Dagger, and that's just because I wasn't able to get a second Ravaging Dagger, and I was not going to purchase, make another character just so I can try to get another Dagger. So we're going with Dagger Axe, but ideally you'll be going with Double Dagger instead. Even though we don't have the additional crit damage, the crit chance from the extra Dagger does still improve our DPS a little bit more than what the Axe would do. And then for our back bar, we have the VMA Bow, Infused Poison Damage Enchant. Our main hand is going to be Nirn with the Disease Damage Enchant, and you can swap that Disease Enchant out for an Absorb Stamina Enchant if you need additional sustain. And then our offhand is going to be the Dagger, the Precise Weapon Damage Enchant. You can go with Infused if you'd like, but I found that Precise pulled a little bit better DPS overall. And then for jewelry traits, I have 1 Bloodthirsty, 2 Infused. Stam PKs do not have an execute, so Bloodthirsty is not quite as effective as it would be on like a Stam Nightblade, which does have an execute. But Bloodthirsty is still a very powerful option here. So you can go with any combination of Bloodthirsty and Infused. So 3 Bloodthirsty, 3 Infused, and everything in between. For enchants, we have 3 weapon damage enchants. So this rotation that I have right here, when you combine it with our TAM, our TAM or Throne, you combine it with the Redguard passive, and if you're running something like Absorb Stamina Enchant, you have enough sustain to sustain for at least 2, maybe 3 minutes. So you don't necessarily need to have a stamina regen glyph here. And for armor, it's all Divines, all Stamina Enchants, except for that one small piece that has a health jet there. So that is it for our gear options. Going on to our character sheet here, we are a red guard. I pretty much found that you have to be a red guard if you want to do light attack rotation. You can do it as a Khajiit, but you guys start heavy attacking so much that you might as well just run a heavy attack rotation. Same thing with Wood Elves, and Imperials as well. So you do want to be red guards for that additional sustain. So Adrenaline Rush, it works out to be about another 140, 150 additional stamina regen per second. So that was a huge boon for Stamp case because our sustain is pretty bad overall. Because we're running the Ravager does have a 1-piece health bonus, so we are able to put 64 points into Stamp here. So if you are an Imperial, so Imperials get 12% max health and 10% max stamina, then you can also run 64 points into stamina no matter what set combination you run. But if you're running anything except the Ravager, so let's say you're using Advanced Yokeda instead of the Ravager, you will need to put 10 points into health in order to get up to about 17k health. It's just the nature of running Throne or Tam Takeaway Broth. It's just the nature of it. If you're an Imperial, don't have to worry about putting points into health. 12% health bonus is more than enough to get you up to 17k health. But if you are a Red Guard, a Khajiit, or a Wood Elf, those are the 3 races that I would recommend running. Red Guard first, then Khajiits and Wood Elves. Yes, you will need to put points into health unless you're running the Ravager. Now for our Mundus Stone, we're going with the Lover. Because of the changes to Night Mother's Gaze and Thunder Flame that happened, they are no longer unique debuffs, so you will need to run the Lover in order to get to penetration cap. Now, I mentioned earlier with Twice Fang Snake, if you're running Twice Fang Snake and the Lover, and you have Alkosh, you will end up over-penetrating. If you're running Twice Fang Snake, the Lover, and your tank is not running Alkosh, then you will likely not over-penetrate, or if you do over-penetrate, it won't be by that much. But if you are running Alkosh, and you are running Twice Fang Snake as well, you will need to use the Warrior instead. So that's kind of one thing you want to keep in mind if you are thinking about running Twice Fang Snake. And for food, we are running our Tam Takeaway Broth. This is the gold stamina drink. It's considered a food right now, but it is bugged. It should be a drink. It's basically a slightly upgraded version of Dubious Comoran Throne, which gives us max health, max stam, and stam regen. Our Tam just adds a little bit additional stats as well as the health regen. So if you can afford our Tam Takeaway Broth, definitely purchase it. It's still fairly expensive. I think it's still around 7 or 6k per food item. Might actually be a little bit more actually on PCNA. So don't feel like you have to use our Tam Takeaway Broth. You can certainly go ahead and use Dubious Command Throne instead. Your stats will be a little bit lower, but that's fine. Dubious is still plenty strong for all the content in the game. Now for our skills. So we're going with Venomous Claw, Noxious Breath, Shrouded Dagger, Rending Slashes, Rearming Trap, and Mephala Dawnbreaker. Then for our back bar, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, the standard stam back bar rotation. Then we have Rearming Trap and Flames of Oblivion. Then we have Standard of Might. Now I have played around with a couple of different bar setups here. So if you want to include something like Deadly Cloak for progression style stuff, you can replace Rearming Trap, Deadly Cloak. It is going to be DPS loss just because you don't have that 3% additional weapon damage on the front bar anymore. Then you can just use Trap while you're on your back bar instead. However, if you don't want to run Deadly Cloak at all, then this front bar is pretty much stable. You don't really need to change too much with your front bar here. The back bar though, so Rearming Trap here is obviously just here for the 3% additional weapon damage. You're not actually going to be using it on your back bar. That's just to kind of speed up your back bar rotation a little bit, because obviously your front bar has the higher weapon damage, so you want to be on that bar in order to use your spam and things like that. This is kind of a flex spot here. So I did try out using Molten Armaments because we still have a few heavy attacks here and there, and it ended up being about even. So if you want to run Molten Armaments, go ahead. You also get back a little bit of stamina every time you use Molten Armaments. So it's just a little bit, but the sustain does help a little. Does help. And so yeah, that's the one thing that you can kind of swap out. You can use Molten Armor instead of Rearming Trap here if you would like. That's the main one that you can swap out here and there. Now, I'm already can hear people asking, why aren't we using Crushing Weapon instead? or imbue weapon. So why aren't we using Crushing Weapon? And that's just because Shrouded Dagger gives us a little bit of additional cleave, so we're able to cleave a little bit more. Crushing Weapon is nice in that it does deal more damage. It does cost a little bit more stamina, and also Crushing Weapon does heal you as well. So that's nice, but the heal is really secondary because you should be getting healed by your healer. And then you also have that Spell Orb passive, which does do a little bit of DPS. So you can see here it does 45, 58 physical damage, and obviously scales with your CP, I think. But overall, because Shrouded Dagger is a dual wield ability, it does actually is affected by all of these passives here. So in particular, Slaughter. So under 25% health, Shrouded Dagger does 20% more damage. So if we do the math, 20%, that basically means while we're under 25% health, Shrouded Daggers is beating out Crushing Weapon. So that's one of the main reasons why we're using Shrouded Daggers here. You also get a little bit of additional damage bonus against basically stunned enemies, so that's always useful, but the main thing here is the additional cleave. So the cleave is pretty important. Crushing Weapon doesn't give you any cleave, and then obviously Slaughter, because Crushing Weapon is not affected by Slaughter. So I did try Crushing Weapon and did try Shrouded Daggers, and Shrouded Daggers ended up being a little bit easier to sustain because it's a little bit cheaper, and it did end up pulling just a little bit better DPS. So that's why we're using Shrouded Daggers instead of Crushing Weapon, because I already know people are going to be asking that. Alright, moving on to our CP points. CP cap is 780, which gives us 260 points to put across the 3 different constellations. Starting off with our green CPs. 75 in Mooncalf, 75 in Tenacity. That leaves 110 points, which you can put into the remaining nodes really however you'd like. It's kind of up to you where you want to put them, which kind of passives you want. You can even push Mooncalf and Tenacity up to 100 if you'd like for the final 1%. Then that just leaves 60 points to put wherever you want. So I have 40 Shadow Ward, 40 Tumbling, 30 Warlord. Again, it's kind of up to you. For our blue CPs, again, I do want to reiterate here that we are, this is focused in around having an optimized raid group or a very good raid group. So we have Alclash, we have Infused Crusher, so that's why we have 25 points in the piercing. Now, if you don't have very good Alclash uptime, or don't have very good Crusher uptime, you might need to put some more points into piercing. Kind of basically kind of see what your group is like. So if you do have to add a couple more points in the piercing, you can take 5 out of Thaumaturge, you can take maybe 4 out of Master at Arms. That gives you another 9 points, so you can bump this up to 34. And then if you absolutely still need more points, then you can take 8 out of Mighty and put the piercing to get you up to 42. But this is for an optimized group, so we have 64 Mighty, 25 piercing, 61 precise strikes, 66 Thaumaturge, and 44 Master at Arms. We still want more points of Thaumaturge compared to Master at Arms, just because a lot of our damage is still going to be coming from dots. So Thaumaturge is still very, very important. And finally, for our red CPs, this particular setup is kind of a more balanced approach, so it's not necessarily going to be the best mitigation for any single piece of content, but it's going to give you very good mitigation across all pieces of content. So if you do want to optimize your mitigation for, let's say, VMAW, you will need to move your points around. So we have 66 into Ironclad, 56 into Thickskin, 64 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. That leaves 10 points, which we'll put into Quick Recovery. So this is only here for the Field Position passive. So this, when you're resurrecting another player, basically gives you 50% damage reduction and damage taken buff. So that's really, really nice to have while you're resurrecting, particularly for progression style guilds. If you're in like a score running guild or your speed running guild or leaderboard guild, first of all, while you're still watching this video, you probably already know what I'm talking about. And then secondly, you're not really going to be rezzing. Most guilds that are pushing for score and speed typically reset if somebody dies, unless they're already like more than halfway in. Each guild's a little bit different, so this is only really useful for more casual runs and for progression style runs. All right, so that's all of the build information. So now let's go ahead and talk about our rotation. So I like to think this rotation in 2 stages. The first stage, you have 1 heavy attack on your front bar. Second stage, you have 2 heavy attacks on your front bar. I tried to do 1 heavy attack every single cycle every time I'm on front bar rotation, but that ended up being too difficult to sustain on a 6 million dummy. And if I can't sustain on a 6 million dummy with a rotation, then I have to try to figure out something else. So introducing a 1 heavy attack front first time, and then 2 heavy attacks the next time, and alternating between them. That gave me enough sustain in order to basically fully sustain a 6 million damage parse. So the backbar rotation is pretty much the same as you would expect. And this hail, Caltrops, poison injection, standard, all that stuff. You obviously want to use standard, then poison injection, so you can bar swap cancel out of poison injection. The front bar rotation is going to be where things get a little bit tricky. It's going to be very different from a normal stam decay build because, again, this is a light attack build, not a heavy attack build. So obviously you want to just pop up with your potion. If you're running both armaments, have that up. Try to have Flames of Oblivion up too. And then you obviously, I like to start off with a Rearming Trap, get a Minor Force going. Then do 1 heavy attack right away. And then the rest are just light attacks for the time. And for the 2 heavy attacks, I do 2 right away. And then go right back to the light attack rotation. And then you just alternate. Like I said, think of it as in 2 steps. The first step has 1 heavy attack, the second step has 2 heavy attacks. That's basically the entire location. And because we don't have an execute, we don't necessarily have to worry about doing anything different once we hit a certain threshold, because slaughters are passive, so they automatically start taking effect. And again, we don't have an execute ability, so we don't have to worry about going into execute at all. I'm just going to kill the dump here. So my front bar rotation is pretty much light attack straight into Venomous Claws, and then from there you can do either 1 heavy attack or 2 heavy attacks. So you do a heavy attack, Noxious, then light attack, Rending slashes, and then just light weave throughout if that's the 1 heavy attack. If you do 2 heavy attacks, heavy attack into Noxious, heavy attack into Rending, and then light attack throughout until you have to re-up your backbar dots. That's just kind of the order of skills that I like to do it. I always like to do Venomous Claws first and then Noxious on the solo parts, but you can obviously change it around however you like. Most damn DKs will recommend getting Venomous Claw up just because it usually deals the most DPS out of those 3 front bar dots. Alright. So let's go ahead and do a 6 million W parse so you guys can get an idea of what we're able to pull, and so you have a point of comparison with a heavy attack stam DK build. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, I have pretty much gone toe-to-toe with a heavy attack build. Sometimes my heavy attack pulls higher, other times this build pulls higher, but on average, heavy attack seems to eke out a little bit more DPS, and it's obviously a lot easier to sustain, it's a lot easier rotation to do. I prefer the heavy attack build, even if in a raid the light attack build pulls a little bit higher, just because it's just easier to sustain. You don't have to worry about sustaining as much. So like if you die, you don't have to necessarily worry about getting orbs or anything. You just do your heavy attack rotation and you're able to sustain perfectly fine. With the red guard, heavy attack stam decay builds, you don't have to worry about orbs or anything like that. Your sustain is more than adequate. But light attack build, as you will see, you feel the sustain burn, so that's kind of why I prefer the heavy attack build. But again, up to you if you want to run this or not. So let's go ahead and get started here with the parts. Oop, I used the wrong ability, so we'll just wait for it to get out of combat and then do it again. I didn't mean to use Venomous Claws, I meant to drink a potion instead. So we'll just reset the dummy and go right back into it. Come on. Alright. Here we go. Now I'll drink my potion. Oops. I used the wrong ability. Off to a great start. Now when you 2 heavy attacks on the front bar, you normally have enough time to do 2 Shrouded Daggers. If you're doing 1 heavy attack, you normally have enough time to do 3 Shrouded Daggers. Then bar swap cancel out of your trap animation. Heavy attack build, you have no problem sustaining. The light attack build, you can already see just trying to run 5. Oh, I think I just did 2. I think I just did 2 heavy attacks. So you can already see very low on stamina. Luckily we have our ultimate up, so we'll be able to get much stamina back. Well, you can see there, if it didn't have ultimate up, it would have been a very bad situation. So there we go. That is the light attack build here. So this was one of the better parts that I've had at almost 45k. I'm just gonna let the dummy traffic through its thing. So if you guys saw my heavy attack build, you noticed that this is about 1k higher. But like I mentioned before we dropped our second standard, our resources were pretty low, and if we didn't have the standard up, we would have been in a really bad spot. We would basically have to do a full heavy attack rotation on our front bar in order to get back our resources in order to sustain our back bar rotation. So that's one of the dangers of running a light attack build. If you're not able to sustain it, it ends up doing worse than a heavy attack build. And a light attack build is innately going to be more complex just because you have to keep track of what you're doing. And so that was with 1 heavy attack, 2 heavy attacks, alternating. I have done 2 heavy attacks the whole time, and that's a little bit easier to sustain. You still kind of start to run dry a little bit around the same time. It's the same time in that parse, so right before you get your ultimate back up. So that's just something that you want to keep in mind if you do want to run a light attack build. If you're able to sustain it, then yes, it will end up doing even to, if not a little bit better than the heavy attack build. But the challenge is trying to sustain it. And so trying to sustain it is going to take a lot of compromises here. So we're running Throne or Artaeum Takeaway Broth instead of blue food. So we're losing some max stamina there. And we're losing a lot of sustain as a result. I've also tried running Ballista instead of Standard of Might. It ended up pulling less. So we still want to run Standard of Might. And like I mentioned earlier, if you happen to die or you have to, run out of stamina because you're breaking free, this build is just going to lose a lot of steam because you're running out of stamina versus the heavy attack build where you're just like, oh, I'll just heavy attack my resources back because it's part of my rotation anyways. So there are some weaknesses behind a light attack build, which is why I personally don't recommend it unless you are a very experienced player. That's just because of all the weaknesses and kind of compromises that you're making by using this particular build. That being said, though, it's still a very good build. You're still able to pull equal or higher DPS than a heavy attack build. You just have to keep in mind all the weaknesses and adjustments that you're going to have to make if you are going to be running this build. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found it informative. If you guys have any questions about this build or stand decays in general, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I don't know that many people who still run stand decays. As far as I know, there's only one other person who's running stand decays, and I'm not sure if he's raiding anymore. So if you do have a question that I can't answer, I'll try to see if he's able to answer it and get that answer back to you guys. So again, hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.